So, yes, well, this is, I think, maybe for some, the first sight of the book that you will receive. This actually, as a project in Langham Preaching, started about 4 or 5 years ago. We were looking for a book that we could have translated in as many languages as possible to be used in our preaching movements around the world. And so far, I think it's now in about 20 languages. I'm delighted to see that it has now been translated into Swedish, which is fantastic. Let me tell you a little bit about John and what this book is about and why we thought this would be a good idea. We still think it's a good idea, so that's good. So John died in 2011, aged 90, and in many ways he was an anomaly. There were things that were unique about him, and he was clearly a man for his time. He was brought up effectively to be a child of empire. So he was from a well-to-do family. His father was a very senior doctor, and indeed, I think, was the surgeon to the king at one point, and was a military doctor. And the area near where All Souls Langham Place Church is in central London is still well known as the sort of the centre for private medicine. And so all the sort of top medical consultants will have their consulting rooms just round the corner. And so John Stotts' father was one of these. But what is interesting is that having had a very privileged education and was being groomed to be somebody who would clearly go and work for the British Foreign Office or the Colonial Office and go and probably, one day run a colony somewhere. John was very good at languages particularly. He read French and German at Cambridge University. He was converted at about the age of 16 or 17 and very, very quickly was seen to be somebody who was gifted and a natural leader. And from that point on, he was absolutely convinced that he wanted to be a Bible teacher and a pastor. And he had been as a child, brought to All Souls. So I think he started going to All Souls at the age of 3. He got ordained during the Second World War. He was at seminary from about 1942 and was ordained in London in 45 or 46. And then at the age of only 29 became the rector, the senior minister at All Souls in 1950. So basically, it's an extraordinary thing that he spent his entire life from about the age of 4 to when he had to go to a retirement home aged 86 in one church. I don't know of any other person who is so identified with just one church and spends literally their whole life there. He never married. He never lived outside London. He certainly never lived in another country. And yet, one of the extraordinary things is, because of his sense of a big world and the desire to see people all over the world come to Christ for themselves, he had a deep passion for global mission and for evangelism and for Bible teaching. And that could have come with, how can you put it, the caricature of British imperial arrogance that basically assumed to know best wherever it was in the world. And indeed, there were a lot of people like that. The extraordinary thing is that John had a humility and a willingness to learn from others from a very early stage. And that meant that he was greatly loved in different places all over the world. One of the key friendships that he had was with Billy Graham, and they could not have been more different. So Billy Graham, of course, from the American South, the sort of global crusading evangelist, filled stadia all over the world with, the old gospel, with his band of musicians that's singing old-style gospel hymns and stuff. And his model and method didn't change very much at all throughout his life. And a friendship with John Stott seemed incredibly unlikely, and yet there was this profound mutual trust. And I think where you see this particularly bear fruit was at the Lausanne Congress in 1974 in Switzerland. Now, Billy Graham's organization had run a number of gatherings of evangelists. And, they've been doing this for a long time. And the idea would be to get people together from different countries and so on. But primarily, it'd be focused on giving people a sort of shared vision, sort of firing them up, enthusing them for doing gospel mission. But it was pretty one-directional. It was basically from the experts, usually in North America, maybe one or two from elsewhere, in other words, Northern Europe, for the benefit of the rest of the world. And what was extraordinary about 1974 is that John was asked to be the theologian for the Congress, and he insisted. And some of the discussions were not straightforward. He insisted that there would be voices from other parts of the world, so that there were people from Latin America, from Africa and Asia on the main platform, and that wouldn't have happened without him. And I think that's one of the things that meant that they were forced to face some very difficult questions. So I think in the 70s, only one country in Latin America was not under a dictatorship. And several countries were facing the problem of people disappearing. He had a lot of connections with IFES, the International Fellowship of Evangelical Students. So Credo in Sweden is part of that. And he was getting questions from friends in the Latin American IFES movements who were saying, how do I disciple people and lead students in Bible studies when they are facing the problem that one week they've got a group of 8 people and then the following week it's only 6 because 2 people have been disappeared and now we know they've been killed. You can't ignore that. You can't just say, well, I'm only here to preach the gospel and not deal with social or political problems. And similarly, there would be questions of, say, in South Africa, of poverty and corruption. How do we preach the gospel when these other things are going on and you can't ignore them? And the Westerners would have insisted, oh, well, no, but we're here not to talk about politics. We can't get diverted into social issues or whatever. And yet these people were saying, we're not diverting. This is the pressing thing. This is the issue that comes first. We've got to have something to say. And so the challenge was to try and engage with these things while always keeping the gospel focus central. And I think that was one of the things that John was so good at. He was very strong on listening to different voices from around the world without losing the focus on the gospel. And so his legacy really is out of proportion in a way to the life of one individual. Langham Partnership was created to try and bring together some of the things that he'd done around the world with a bit of methodology and intention before he died. And Langham Preaching was the baby of the partnership because preaching was so central to what he did. Now, he wrote over 50 books during his life. Nearly all of them were typed up by his secretary, Frances Whitehead, who I knew quite well. She was his secretary for over 50 years. and she typed all of them. He wrote them all by hand, and he was somebody who measured and weighed every single word he wrote. There was never a loose word or a lazy sentence. He was someone who was almost, perhaps sometimes a little too perfectionist, but it meant that actually the words that he did use came with crystal clarity. And what you have in this book was, if you like, a distillation of things that he had written over many years. So this is one of 2 or 3 books written towards the end of his life, which basically draw all the threads together. So just as this is in a way drawing today's threads together, this book is one of those books that actually brings together many of the things that he taught about what the Bible is and how the Bible functions in the modern world. And so that's why in Langham Preaching we wanted to see that this would be distributed in as many contexts as possible. So it's an absolute thrill to see that it is now here in Sweden. I think it's the great benefit of it is that it's short. And I think that is one of those sort of pan-cultural attractions, isn't it? It doesn't matter where you are in the world. People basically get intimidated by fat books. This is a thin book. And because John is so good at making things clear, it's a very easy read in many ways. And it's so, I mean, in a way, it's almost so clear and so easy that you can skim through it very quickly and miss the depth. Sometimes it's almost worth stopping, certainly after each chapter. There are just 5 short chapters, but certainly after each chapter, maybe even after every few pages, and just stopping and just reflecting, what is he saying here? Because there's so much depth and background behind what he says. That it's easy just to sort of miss the significance of it. But nevertheless, I am absolutely convinced that it'll be of huge benefit to you and to those in your churches and fellowships, because I think he really does provide a framework for understanding why on earth we need to bother with the Bible at all. So I can't recommend this enough. I'm really glad that everybody will be getting a copy. Yeah, I don't think I've got anything to add.